Ever hear the phrase fight fire with fire? What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing you a video on how to beat Mystic Mine Burn. Yes, the longer the flame lasts, the longer it's going to grow, and Mystic Mine Burn has just been proliferating all over the competitive scene. This deck is catching like wildfire and is definitely something you have to prepare for if you're going to a regional, a national, or even going into the WCQs, which aren't really too far away from now. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and bring you guys this video today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I want to kick things off with kind of the central way of beating this deck, and that is hitting Mystic Mine entirely. Now, this is a little bit weird because we have to go back to the old days of main decking spell and trap removal. I think Nightmare Phoenix has spoiled us a lot ever since its release in Flames of Destruction, because Nightmare Phoenix was kind of like the go-to way to solve any sort of like continuous spell or trap that was on the field, just by being able to make it, because it's completely generic, so pretty much every deck was able to play it. You discard a card, you pop the card, and it's really something you don't have to worry about. But since Mystic Mine doesn't let you use monster effects, we have to return to the days of main decking spell and trap removal in the form of spell and traps. So what options do we have available? So the first thing that comes to mind is Twin Twister, because basically everyone's been citing Twin Twister since that card was released. I think in Breakers of Shadow. Has it really been that long now? Twin Twister is just an amazing card, not only because it's going to hit the Mystic Mine, but it can also hit another card at the same time. So if they're playing something like a Wave Motion Cannon or one of their other back row, it's going to either force it out or it's going to just stop it entirely and just send it to the graveyard at the cost of discarding one card. And that cost can be mitigated by a lot of decks, since we're in a format right now that has so many graveyard-centric decks. I mean, you've got Orcus, you've got Salamangreat, so that discard isn't like the worst thing in the world. But if you're not wanting to discard a card, you could always just relegate to a card like Mystical Space Typhoon. Mystical Space Typhoon is a much simpler one-for-one, and for decks that can't really afford to discard a card, Mystical Space Typhoon might be the option for you. It has all the same upside as Twin Twister being a quick play spell and all that, but at the same time, it's a way that you can kind of just hit the Mystic Mine without having to relinquish any of your other resources. Maybe for a very combo-heavy deck and you want to make sure you have as many combo pieces in your hand as possible, or any other particular reason why you might not want to play Twin Twister. Another really cool option is Typhoon, because Typhoon, while it's kind of like a pseudo Mystical Space Typhoon in a way, although it is a trap card, it's cool because you can activate it from your hand on turn 0. And the thing about Typhoon that's really neat is the fact that it has some nice flexibility in other matchups, but being a trap also gives it some nice versatility, because it's not going to be susceptible to ways to stop spell cards like ways like Twin Twister and Mystical Space Typhoon might. So in those weird niche instances where your opponent might flip like Imperial Order, Secret Village of the Spellcaster, Anti-Spell Fragrance, Typhoon is still a way you can out those cards while also simultaneously hitting Mystic Mine at the same time. I know this is a Mystic Mine oriented video, but the thing is, because the deck isn't exactly meta, but it's like relevant enough that you need to have the outs for it, but you still want to not take away from the fact that there's still 4 other tier 1 decks that you have to worry about. So finding the best options for you in this middle ground where it's good against the other top 4 decks, but then it's also good against Mystic Mine is kind of the sweet spot we're trying to go for here. Another good option is Cosmic Cyclone. I mean, Cosmic Cyclone is basically Mystical Space Typhoon, but you have to pay 1,000 life points, but it banishes whatever you hit with it. And why that's good is that when you're looking at your other matchups that are especially graveyard reliant, like Salamangreat, Orcus, hell, even Sky Striker for that matter, you can banish the resource so that it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to get that card back. That means they can't recur it with any of their Salamangreat cards. You know, multi-rolls, I can be able to get it with Sky Striker, hitting one of their key combo pieces in Orcus, while simultaneously having a way to out a card like Mystic Mine. Now, the only downside here is that paying 1,000 life points puts Mystic Mine Burn closer to their win condition, because it is a burn deck and any life points that you have to pay pretty much is just helping them, and pretty much more so than any other strategy, because they are playing burn. So that is something to keep in mind and why I would hesitate to play a card like this, but it does have its advantages compared to something like Mystical Space Typhoon. Another card is Heavy Storm Duster. Heavy Storm Duster is kind of just the trap equivalent to Twin Twister, but you don't have to discard a card to do it. And yeah, sure, you could lose your battle phase, but if you do it during your opponent's turn, it doesn't matter. Some decks might want to play this instead. Again, it just purely depends on the type of deck you're going for. Spell Shattering Arrow is like another card, I guess. It's quick play, it hits all face-up spells, so that's kind of neat. It also hits them for some damage as well. I guess you could hit like Wave Motion Cannon with it too, I suppose, but just another option. But I think my favorite option, if we're talking specifically for Mystic Mind Burn, is Unending Nightmare. Now, Unending Nightmare does require you to pay 1,000 life points every time you activate it, but a single copy of Unending Nightmare, if you can get it to stick on the board, can deal with not only one copy of Mystic Mind, but every single copy of Mystic Mind that they're going to bring out of their deck. So yes, it is kind of a race against the clock, but if that Unending Nightmare sticks, you can ensure that you're not going to have to worry about Mystic Mind for the duration of the game, and then it's just a race against your opponent to see who can kill who faster, because Unending Nightmare is going to be draining your life and they are playing burn, but you don't have to worry about Mystic Mind for the duration of the game. Now, one card that's just as important as Mystic Mind in Mystic Mind Burn is Metaverse, because Metaverse is not only terraforming, but it allows them to immediately activate the field spell on their field. So as soon as you play one monster, they can flip Metaverse, activate Mystic Mind, it's now active, you can no longer activate effects, you can't attack, and basically they're going to have control of the game from that point. So I wanted to dedicate a section of this video to cards that can help you stop Metaverse, because honestly, Mystic Mind is one part of the problem, but if you can't stop Metaverse as well, then you're really not hitting all parts of the problem here. So the first card that's probably the most generic way to stop it is Ash Blossom, because Ash Blossom will stop it since it would be a card that would add a card to your opponent's hand. Ash Blossoming Metaverse can be absolutely critical and just prevent your opponent from getting to that Mystic Mind if they don't have multiple ways to access it already. You've also got a card like Red Reboot. Now I know this is something you're probably not going to see until you get to the side deck, but Red Reboot can pretty much stop the Metaverse entirely, shut down all other trap cards your opponent controls, which is huge because they are playing a burn deck. The thing is though with Red Boot, it is a very high risk, high reward card, because if you activate Red Reboot, you have to kill them that turn because you're paying half your life points to activate it. Sure, they're not going to be able to use any traps, but if they get a turn back, when you figure the fact that they have like Secret Barrel, Just Desserts, and so many other cards in their deck to burn you, you're probably going to be dead the next turn if you don't kill them. So definitely keep that in mind. There's also cards like DENKO SEKKA. Now, most Mystic Mind players aren't going to just immediately flip Metaverse like in the standby phase, because if they do that, neither of you are going to control monsters, so you could just end your turn, Mystic Mind will destroy itself in the end phase, and then you're no longer under the card's lock. Sure, you didn't really do anything that turn, but you at least solve the problem of Mystic Mind being on the field. So you can essentially go to main phase 1, drop DENKO, and if they don't have any way to negate that DENKO summon, you're not going to be able to see Metaverse, or they're not going to be able to see Metaverse rather, which means they can't get to Mystic Mind, and it's going to shut down all their other back row as well, so they're not going to be able to burn you to death. This is going to be a very solid card if you're playing a combo deck like Danger Thunder, like Orcust, or just anything that can relinquish its normal summon and still kill its opponent. Another really cool card is Anti-Spell Fragrance, because Anti-Spell Fragrance has a really neat interaction here. So if you have Anti-Spell Fragrance face up and they use Metaverse, thing is they can't actually place the card face up in the field zone because Anti-Spell Fragrance is face up, so they actually have to put the card in their hand. And then they still can't activate it because Anti-Spell Fragrance is active, so they have to set it, and then they have to wait an entire turn to activate it. And Anti-Spell Fragrance actually has some pretty good matchups across the board when you look at Salamangreat, Sky Striker, and other decks like that. So maybe not a bad card to see for games 2 and 3 if you want to have a little bit of coverage in terms of all your meta matchups. Now for the last section of this video, I just want to cover some other cards that didn't really belong to one particular category that were pretty good against this matchup. Going really old school here, Prohibition is actually not that bad. I mean, if you're going first and you Prohibition Mystic Mind, I don't really know, unless they have spell or trap removal, if they have any way to out that, so that could actually be pretty nice. It's also not like terrible against other matchups, like if you Prohibition like, you know, a Nightmare card or just certain cards in specific matchups, that could actually be pretty good, although if everyone's going to start maining spell and trap removal, which they're probably going to because Mystic Mind's becoming more popular, Prohibition may not be the best side choice, but I guess it's just some food for thought. There's also another card like Compulsory Evacuation Device. Now, this is something that the OCG started experimenting with, and essentially, if you can get to just one monster on the board, you can compulse the monster back to your hand so that both you and your opponent don't control any, and then Mystic Mine will destroy itself in the end phase. So that's kind of like a neat way to do it, although it does come at the expense of expending a ton of your resources to do that. Another way you could do it though is by playing a card like Torrential Tribute, or maybe any other sort of massive board wipe to clear all monsters from the field, so then that way, again, there's no monsters, so in the end phase, Mystic Mine will destroy itself. Now, you do have to be wary of the fact that your opponent may have ways to negate these cards like Dark Bribe and things like that, and that is going to be the way that they use it to protect their Mystic Mine. However, these are some pretty cool ways to get around it, and plus, if you have a graveyard-centric deck, it may not matter too much if you're torrentialing your entire board, just so you can get out from under Mystic Mine's effect. There's also a card like Magic Deflector. Magic Deflector is a pretty old school card as well. I mean, not as old as like Prohibition, but we haven't seen it in a few formats. It was back in Zodiac format that this card saw a ton of play, and again, it's a field spell. Not only will it negate that, it can negate stuff like any other spell card that they have, like their Wave Motion Cannon, because it pretty much negates all spell effects except for normal spells, so just for one turn. But if that allows you to start playing, that's a pretty good solid answer for Mystic Mine in that regard. And I think one card that a lot of people may have forgotten about recently that I think is actually pretty good right now is Evenly Matched, because Evenly Matched, not only will it possibly deal with the Mystic Mine, but it can just deal with all the other cards your opponent has in their back row, and if they don't have a way to out it, you could just like 1-for-7 them instantly, and then you're just right back in the game. And yeah, sure, they could possibly like leave Mystic Mine face up, but it's just going to destroy itself in the end phase, so realistically, it's not going to matter too much. That card's probably going to die one way or another. I think it's a really good card, and yeah, they can just chain all their cards to it, but at the same time, if they don't have a way to negate it, it may not be the most optimal scenario for them to be using their chain burn spells. So I think Evenly Matched is pretty solid, not to mention against your other matchups, it's a pretty good card as well. If you really want to beat Mystic Mine Burn though, you just have to play True Draco. This card, I mean, this deck probably has like an 80 to 90% win rate against this deck, just because of the fact that it has built-in spell and trap removal in its archetype that's searchable, so it basically always has outs to this deck. I mean, it's just such a one-sided matchup, and is honestly why some people are considering it moving into this format, because not only is it good against Mystic Mine Burn, but it's also fairly decent against the other meta matchups as well. So if you really hate the deck, just join the True Draco fans, and I'm sure they'll happily welcome you. So guys, that's gonna do it for my video on how to beat Mystic Mine Burn. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, and if you have any other options that you would recommend for using against this deck. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon, becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.